our lead story of the day is regarding more footage has been released of the January 6th events by Tucker Carlson on Fox News. The footage we're going to look at today has to do with Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick. And if you recall, the Democrat Party and the January 6th committee were saying that this man was killed on January 6th at the Capitol that day by being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher. And it came out months later by the medical examiner saying, hey, that just didn't happen. That didn't take place. But it did not stop the Democrat Party and the January 6th committee from still pushing that lie and that agenda for literally 2 years. Well, here's the tape itself. Let's see if that really happened here. Let's go ahead and roll it.
Within hours of January 6th, literally hours, you began to hear that day described as a deadly insurrection, and not described by one news outlet or one politician, but in unison by all of them, almost like it was coordinated. A deadly insurrection. That's how history may record January 6th. But the tape that we reviewed from within the building on that day proves it was neither an insurrection nor deadly. Here it is.
January 6th, when an estimated 2,000 rioters breached the Capitol building, causing the deaths of 5 police officers.
Certain dates echo throughout history. December 7th, 1941. September 11th, 2001. And January 6th.
The mob beat officers with anything they had on them.
That just shows you the tenacity and just how far the Democrat Party is willing to go in their lie and the agendas they want to push. They're literally going to lump together Pearl Harbor and 9/11 with what took place on January 6th. You see what they're trying to do and build the narrative that there's a bunch of extremists and terrorists storming the Capitol, right? Trying to overthrow democracy and all this nutso stuff. It's totally crazy what they're willing to do. And they literally been doing it for 2 years. And I'm glad they're finally being exposed by Tucker Carlson here.
Hockey stick, a flagpole, a fire extinguisher. Police officers died.
Donald Trump supporters who, of course, rioted and killed police officers.
By the evening of January 6th, the Democratic Party and its publicists in the national news media had settled on a description of what had happened that day. They distilled an enormous number of highly complex events that even now we don't fully understand, into a single emotionally laden political slogan, which they've repeated for years with remarkable discipline. January 6th, they said, was a deadly insurrection.
There was a deadly insurrection that the right wing is trying to cover up.
He incited a deadly insurrection.
Incited a deadly insurrection.
The violent, deadly insurrection on the Capitol 9 months ago, it was about white supremacy, in my view.
A deadly insurrection. Everything about that phrase is a lie. Very little about January 6th was organized or violent. Surveillance video from inside the Capitol shows mostly peaceful chaos. But the slogan worked. The term deadly carries enormous emotional power, which is why they used it. To prove the insurrection was deadly, propagandists pointed to the death of an officer called Brian Sicknick. The mob killed Officer Brian Sicknick. That's what they said. It was their single most powerful indictment of the January 6th protesters and of Donald Trump and of Republican voters nationally. They repeated that claim for years. They are still repeating it. At first they told...
I remember listening to hearings, and I don't know if it was the House Oversight Committee or was the Senate side of things, but I remember seeing multiple hearings and the Democrats bringing that up and Republicans literally telling them that that's been disproved. And this was about a year and a half after this whole event took place. And they were still pushing it, even pointing again to the medical examiner and other people saying he didn't die that way. And then they were talking about other Capitol police officers dying on the grounds that day as well. And everyone's like, that didn't happen. And they were still pushing it again. And this had been just debunked literally multiple times. And now we get to see the video of it all.
The country that Officer Sicknick was murdered with a fire extinguisher.
Officer Brian Sicknick died after being hit in the head with a fire extinguisher during the fight.
That story came from the New York Times, which is effectively the assignment editor for most of the rest of American media. It was a lie, untrue in any way. But only after that lie had hardened into conventional wisdom did the newspaper bother to retract it.
The New York Times has quietly retracted its story about the death of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick.
The damage had been done. Brian Sicknick, himself a Trump voter, had been transformed without his consent into a political martyr of the left. His memory was shamelessly exploited by the incoming Biden administration. In February of 2021, Sicknick's body lay in state in the Capitol Rotunda, where a parade of unscrupulous politicians made use of it. Here's Joe Biden.
Breaking down the doors, trying to overturn an outcome of election, and killing several police officers in the meantime.
But Brian Sicknick should not be reduced to a prop for the political ambitions of the Democratic Party. He was a human being. The facts of his life matter, including how he died. To this day, media accounts describe Sicknick as someone who was, quote, slain on January 6th. The video we reviewed proves that is a lie. Here is surveillance footage of Sicknick walking in the Capitol after he was supposedly murdered by the mob outside. By all appearances, Sicknick is healthy and vigorous. He's wearing a helmet, so it's hard to imagine he was killed by a head injury. Whatever happened to Brian Sicknick was very obviously not the result of violence he suffered.
Hey, you know what, though, Tucker? Dead people vote for Democrats all the time. This guy's probably dead, too, in their minds. They don't have an actual understanding and definition of what it means to be dead or that it's election day. For them, it's election week. For them, dead people can vote. There's no ground rules here for the Democrat Party. So for all they know, this is a zombie walking around. He is dead. What do you mean, Tucker? They're looking at something totally different than we are. They will see this footage and be like, I don't even see a Capitol Police officer there. I don't see Brian Sicknick. That's how their mind works. But somehow he's walking around, but supposedly he was dead during this time. How that works out, Tucker, I don't know. I'm right there with you. You know, it was a narrative they try to push. They want to make it seem like everybody in there was MAGA extremists. Now they're called ultra MAGA by the Democrat Party and the Biden administration. They're a threat to democracy. Although the people that were pushing this lie for literally 2 years with this footage, by the way, that had markers on it, meaning this clip was one of the clips, by the way, that they watched themselves. And hopefully Tucker brings that up, that they actually viewed this and they knew the guy wasn't dead from the time that they said that he was, from a fire extinguisher. Like, they knew it. The actual January 6th committee viewed all this stuff themselves. And then if you recall the episode that we did last week, before the weekend, they're blaming each other. The January 6th committee chairman was literally blaming the employees, the lower level staff that was watching all this video footage, going, oh, well, we didn't really see it. We had employees kind of rifling through all of it. So I'm not even sure that any of us actually saw all the footage. Oh, good. So you pushed a whole narrative calling people extremists, a threat to democracy, trying to overturn the elections, doing all this stuff. But you yourself didn't even have all the facts, but you had a few selective clips of a video that you kept pushing for literally 2 years plus, and a whole narrative built around something you knew nothing about. That just gives us real confidence in our government as well as the Democrat Party.
At the entrance to the Capitol. This tape overturns the single most powerful and politically useful lie the Democrats have told us about January 6th. And it was indeed a lie. The January 6th committee knew perfectly well that Brian Sicknick was walking normally through the Capitol after he was supposedly murdered by Trump supporters. And they know that because they saw this tape. We can be sure because the footage contains an electronic bookmark that is still archived in the Capitol's computer system. That means that investigators working for the Democratic Party reviewed this tape. They saw it, but they refused to release the tape to the public. Why? Because this tape would shatter the fraud they were perpetrating on the country. Because hiding the truth served their political interest. They lied about the police officer they claimed to revere. If they were willing to do that, then their dishonesty knew no limits.
And you folks, I mean, that whole narrative is truly mind-blowing. And I love that Kevin McCarthy has given this footage to Tucker Carlson. And then you get to make the judgment for yourselves. Yeah, maybe he might be leading you on in some way, shape, or form. I don't believe Tucker Carlson is. I think what he's given us is the truth. But hey, that's the footage. The guy was walking around. We were told that he was a dead man. I mean, he did pass away, which is a terrible thing to think about, but not in the way that the Democrat Party and the progressive left and the January 6th committee was leading us all on. They have an agenda. They have an ideology that they want to push.
I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Bald Brad Show. If you did, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all our future content.